Welcome, bienvenidos, benvindo, to the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, part of the SDH network, the only English language show devoted to South America's premier club competition. I'm your host, Howard Hamilton, the founder of Soccermetrics. It's championship week in South America. Last year in Buenos Aires, we saw a first-time winner's name placed on the Libertadores trophy. On Saturday in Lima, we'll see either Flamengo or Palmeiras put their name on the trophy for a fourth time and put themselves in their own class among Brazilian champions of this competition. In this episode, I'll go deep into the teams, the matchups, and the storylines to get you ready for Saturday's Copa Libertadores final. But before that, there's one other South American final to talk about, and that is the Copa Sudamericana final. This is a matchup between Lanús of Argentina and Atlético Mineiro of Brazil, taking place in Asunción. Mineiro were the stronger team in this match. They had the better chances, yet Lanús was able to resist their advances into their own defensive half, particularly into the penalty area. Lanús had more of the ball in the extra time period, but they lacked the final passes in the final third. In fact, Nahuel Losada, Lanús's goalkeeper, was by a wide margin their best player on the field. Hulk for Atlético Mineiro was the best player on the field for them, combining attacking and creative ability to make himself a constant threat throughout the match. And it's worth mentioning that Hulk is 39 years old. He has become more of a creative force than an attacking force at this stage of his career, but he's still a potent force in South American competition. And it's only because of Losada's exploits that Atlético Mineiro did not score a goal in this match. The match ended goalless after extra time and went to a penalty kick shootout. And in the penalty kick shootout, it took a while for either team to score. Both teams' penalty kick takers missed their first round of the penalty kick shootout. Bo missing for Lanús, Hulk surprisingly missing for Atlético Mineiro. In the second and third rounds of the shootout, both teams' takers converted. In the fourth round, Aquino scored for Lanús, while Biel Teixeira's attempt was saved by Losada. Lautaro Acosta, the former MVP of Major League Soccer, had a chance to convert the winning penalty kick for Lanús, yet his effort went over the crossbar. Emerson scored for Atletico, and the shootout went into sudden death. In the sixth round of the penalty kick shootout, Cardoso scored for Lanús, Alexander converting for Atletico. In the seventh round, Watson scored his attempt for Lanús, but Victor Hugo's attempt for Atlético Mineiro was saved by Losada. Lanús winning the penalty kick shootout 5-4 on penalties. They win the Copa Sudamericana for the second time, adding to their continental triumph in 2013. And more importantly, Lanús will appear in the Copa Libertadores group stage. This has some implications for teams in Argentina who are attempting to qualify. River Plate in particular need either Boca Juniors, Rosario Central, Argentinos Juniors, or Lanús to win the Clausura playoffs in order for them to get promoted to a Copa Libertadores place. River Plate, for their part, lost a tense and dramatic playoff tie against Racing Club 3-2 on Tuesday of this week. So they will be on the sidelines hoping that either Boca, Argentinos, or Lanús, Rosario Central happen to lose their playoff match. They're hoping that either one of those three win the Clausura playoff in order to see them enter the Copa Libertadores in the preliminary stage. So that's it for our run-through of the Copa Sudamericana final. And now the preview, the Copa Libertadores final. From the time that the knockout stage was confirmed, from the time the matchups were confirmed, this was the dream matchup for the final. It was pretty clear that this would be a matchup between the two best teams in Brazil and the two best teams in South America. It's a rematch of the 2021 Copa Libertadores final, which Palmeiras won. It's an encounter between probably the two richest clubs in South America and a side in Palmeiras that has arguably been the most successful club in South American football in the 2020s. And it's a battle for the elusive Tetra. Who will win Copa Libertadores for the fourth time and become the most successful Brazilian club in the history of this competition? Now, I'm saying that Palmeiras and Flamengo were expected to arrive at this stage, yet they reached the final in somewhat unconventional ways. Flamengo in particular finished second in their group. This is a team that had narrow victories against minnows such as Deportivo Táchira and Central Córdoba. Well, they actually didn't beat Central Córdoba. In fact, they lost to Central Córdoba at home, 2-1. And they only drew 1-1 against them in Santiago del Estero. It was a victory against Liga de Quito and a final matchday win against Táchira by the minimum score that allowed them to scrape into second place. There was a three-way tie for the top of the group at 11 points, and they advanced by virtue of goal difference. In the round of 16, they defeated Internacional 3-0 on aggregate. In the quarterfinal round, they survived against Estudiantes de La Plata after a tense penalty kick shootout. And in the semifinal round, it was a defensive effort by Flamengo in Buenos Aires, actually in the Avellaneda, that allowed them to advance to the Copa Libertadores final. Palmeiras, on the other hand, blazed their way through the group stage, winning all 6 group matches for 18 points and a plus 13 goal difference. They routed Universitario in the round of 16, defeating them 4-0 in Lima. They defeated River Plate 5-2 on aggregate, winning both legs 2-1 in Buenos Aires, 3-1 in Sao Paulo. Liga de Quito was the one tie that gave them the most trouble. They lost their first match of this season's Libertadores 3-0 in Quito. Yet they turned it around incredibly with a 4-0 win to wrap up a 4-3 aggregate victory. These two teams, as I mentioned, are the two dominant teams in Brazil, and they have been the two dominant teams in Brazil over the last several seasons, even though they may not have necessarily left Brasileirão with the league title. This has been a Flamengo versus Palmeiras race for the Brasileirão crown. Flamengo have been in the lead since the midpoint of the season. Palmeiras took the lead for 6 matches in the latter half of this season before Flamengo took back the lead in match day 33. They currently lead the competition by 5 points with 2 matches to play. They have 1 more win than Palmeiras, and they have a huge lead in goal difference, plus 50 versus plus 28 for Palmeiras. In a league in which matches won is the first tiebreaker, Flamengo have the hammer on this season's Brasileirão. They have a home match versus Ceará remaining, and an away match versus Mirassol, while Palmeiras have to go on the road for their last two matches. So it's safe to say that this league title is Flamengo's to lose once again, after it being Palmeiras' to lose for a substantial part of the final third of the season. Palmeiras have, in fact, taken the decision to play their reserve players for their most recent league matches and give top priority to Libertadores. They've said in interviews, look, we want to win everything. We never resign ourselves from winning any title, but we have to make a priority, and we're giving a priority to Copa Libertadores. It's a distinction without a difference, in my opinion. I think that they've effectively conceded the title to Flamengo, and they're going for the title for which they have the greatest opportunity and the greatest probability of winning. This is a matchup between the best offensive team in the tournament and the best defensive team in the tournament. Over the 12 matches played by Palmeiras, they've scored 30 goals in Libertadores matches. They've generated 2.6 expected goals per 90, a whopping 1.43 expected goals per 90 from open play alone, 0.96 expected goals per 90 from set piece opportunities, and they've converted their shots at a 15.6 conversion rate. Now, when you consider that the average shot conversion rate in football matches around the world is about 9% to 10%, that's a huge difference in shot conversion rate. 3 players for Palmeiras have scored more than 3 goals. In defense, they've allowed 9 goals. 1.13 expected goals allowed per 90 minutes. And their opponents have been converting their shots at a 6.0 conversion rate, well below the competition average. Flamengo, on the other hand, have not scored a lot of goals in this competition. Of the 12 goals that they have scored, only 2 of their players have scored more than 1 goal apiece. Georgian de Arrascaeta and Pedro, and that's going to be significant for reasons I'll mention later. They have generated 1.72 expected goals per 90, which means that they have generated the chances, but their shot conversion rate has not been very good. At 7.7%, it's probably the lowest conversion rate among teams in the last 8 of this competition. Their strength is in defense. They have allowed only 4 goals over the entire Copa Libertadores. Their opponents have only been able to generate 0.95 expected goals per night, 0.47 from open play, 0.43 set pieces, and 0.04 expected goals per 90 from the penalty spot. And their opponents have only converted their shots into goals at a 4% pace. That is hugely impressive, hugely significant, and there are various pieces of the defense that have contributed that defensive record. Now, both of these teams are entering this match hurt, and that's expected for teams who are still playing at the latter stages of South American competition, especially teams from Brazil that are playing 60-plus matches a season, despite the fact that they have large squads. So everyone is entering this match in Lima hurt. Flamengo's injuries are to Leo Ortiz in center back with an ankle injury, Allen with a heel spur, and most significantly, Pedro with a broken arm that has seen him rolled out of competition for the remainder of this year. That is a big loss for the Red and Black. For the Greens at Palmeiras, probably their most significant injury is to goalkeeper Weverton. This goalkeeper, who is in the rotation for the Brazilian national team, suffered a finger injury that saw him ruled out for the remainder of this year. Carlos Miguel has taken over between the sticks for Palmeiras. They've also had injuries to Lucas Evangelista, a hamstring injury, a shin injury that has ruled Paulinho out, and an ACL injury that has ruled Figueiredo out for a significant amount of time. Now, in terms of suspensions, Palmeiras don't have any suspended players for this final, but Flamengo will have to do without Gonzalo Plata, who received a red card in the second leg versus Racing Club. Now, if we take a look at the managers on both sides, this is going to be a really interesting matchup. Palmeiras are led by Abel Ferreira. The 46-year-old Portuguese was appointed Palmeiras coach on November 2020. He's won a Libertadores title in 2021. He's at the end of his 5-year cycle with the team. It's not certain whether he will return to the squad in 2026. He doesn't have the best of records versus Flamengo. Over 16 matches, he's only won 3 of them and drawn 5. Versus Felipe Luis, he's never or drawn against him in official matches. Now, let's talk about Felipe Luis. He's a 40-year-old, Brazilian 40-year-old. He has played for Flamengo for a significant amount of time. He actually played for Flamengo in the 2021 final. He was appointed in September of 2024, and he has had a steep upward trajectory in his career. There's been a lot of criticism of Brazilian coaches in the major South American clubs, at the national team of Brazil. A lot of that has been, Felipe Luis has been, he has really stood out as an exception to what has been the rule for Brazilian managers. A young manager, very intelligent. He has very interesting ideas on how to set up his club, how to set up his teams. He's been influenced by European managerial practices in the right way. So I think people really saw him as someone who could eventually become Brazilian national team manager. And this cycle was too soon, but he's almost certainly going to be considered for the national team role in future World Cup cycles. He's undefeated versus Palmeiras in his career. Played 2, won 2 versus Palmeiras and against Abel Ferreira. Now moving on to the key players for either side. Palmeiras' strength, as I mentioned, is in their attack. You have players such as Victor Roque, who came back from Europe. He scored 4 goals in this competition. He's one of the leading goal scorers for Palmeiras across all competitions in 2025. Beside him, you have Jose Lopez of Argentina. He is tied with Adrian Martinez for leading goal scorer in Copa Libertadores in 2025, and he's among the leading goal scorers for Palmeiras across all competitions. He pairs off very well against Victor Roque. Neither of those 2 players scored in the semifinal tie versus Liga de Quito, though. Player who did score and really made significant contributions in Palmeiras' comeback was Rafael Veiga in midfield. And Palmeiras are going to rely not just on his goal scoring, but more so his creative ability. They're also going to rely on Andres Pereira, who played significant roles in that comeback in the semifinal and has been a steady presence in the midfield alongside Mauricio. Now, their defense, they're probably going to have to ride out their defense for significant portions of the game. And this is going to be a match in which defensive midfield strength is going to be important. That holding midfielder role is going to be hugely important for Palmeiras getting the ball forward to Roque and Lopez. Flamengo, much has been said about Flamengo's defense. And when you talk about Flamengo's defense, you really have to talk about Agustin Rossi. Rossi came from Boca Juniors. He's been with the club for at least 5 years now. He is arguably the best goalkeeper in South America. Definitely the best penalty kick stopper. He provides a steadiness in defense that really serves as a platform for their defensive efforts. Now, if you look in the defensive midfield, the duo of Eric Pulgar and Jorginho is hugely important to holding their passing pattern, to keeping and holding on to their passing patterns. Pulgar especially. Samuel Lino, who came on from Atletico Madrid, is also going to be important. Luis Araujo in midfield, who came from Atlanta United, a former Atlanta United player, he stood out for his play in the midfield. He has contributed some on goals, not as much in the latter stages of the competition, but he is an important contributor. But by a significant margin, the most important player that Flamengo have is Jorge de Arrascaeta. He's been with the club for 7 years now. This is probably his best year playing for Flamengo. He leads the team in goals across all competitions. He's among the league leaders in goals in the Brasileirão. He's among the league leaders in assists. He hasn't scored as many goals in Libertadores competition, but he is among the leading contributors in terms of goal contributions. I have said multiple times that if I were a member of the South American press and I had a vote for South American Player of the Year, I would give it to him. He has been that important to Flamengo's exploits across all competitions in 2025. And if Flamengo win Libertadores, if they win Brasileirão and wrap up that Brasileirão Libertadores double, Arrascaeta will be a huge reason why they were able to achieve that. Going to my prediction for this match, I think this is a matchup between the best attack and the best defense. I would not expect a goal fest. I think this is going to be a match with very few chances. I think that statistic of Palmeiras not being successful against Flamengo is significant. I think that Felipe Luis sets his teams up very well, particularly against clubs such as Palmeiras. And in my opinion, Flamengo are the hottest team in Brazil and in South America right now. That said, I think this is going to be a really tight encounter. I don't think that there will be a lot of chances given to the front line of Palmeiras or to Arrascaeta. I would not be surprised if this went into extra time. And I would also not be surprised if this went to penalties. And if it did went to penalties, then the advantage shifts significantly toward Flamengo because of the presence of Rossi. So for that and other reasons, I'm not going to hazard a scoreline, but I do believe that Flamengo are going to come out of the final victorious. They will win the Tetra. They will win Libertadores for the fourth time on Saturday in Lima. So that is my preview of the 2025 Copa Libertadores final. And if you have a comment or question about this podcast, or about the Copa Libertadores in general, you are more than welcome to send them to my X handle @SoccerMetrics. You can also send questions or comments to @SoccerDownHere or to Jason Longshoe. I will have a rapid reaction to the Libertadores final on Saturday night, followed by a longer recap of the final next week. This has been the Soccer Metrics Copa Libertadores show, proudly part of the SDH network. See you later. Hasta luego e até mais.